Hello everyone! A little break from pins to talk with Stéphane Bordas about what a PhD had brought to his career. I met Stéphane during my PhD and we kept collaborating after I left academia as he introduced me to the fantastic team of Eleni Koronaki. What has always surprised me about Stéphane is his relentless curiosity and ability to explore new fields, which include numerical simulations and machine learning, but expand to a never-ending plethora of applications. We recently met in a cafe, talking about life, and he told me he wished more people would do a PhD. Here is the conversation that followed. We were in a cafe after a long day of work, and you look at me and say, I wish more people do a PhD. And this really impressed me. And I said, okay, we need to have a public conversation about it. Because I think that a PhD career, right, is often taking a bad rap nowadays. And many people fear that this is just a road to a very narrow career. And I think you're exactly the proof that this is not the case. You had a stellar career. You started your PhD in Northwestern University, and then after a couple of postdoc in APFL and Glasgow, if I remember correctly, you joined Cardiff when you win an ERC and become a professor. And from there, honestly, your career becomes so bright that it's difficult to follow because you had done so many incredible things. So I wanted to start asking you, what's the secret?
I guess the first thing I should definitely say is that probably the secret is not wanting to do a PhD in the beginning, if you take me as an example.
Like with many great things in life, right? The secret for success is not really being obsessed with that. Yeah.
So that, I mean, honestly, I did it completely accidentally. I did it because I met my wife there, ex-wife now, and this was the major motivation, is to stay in Chicago for a bit longer. And a bit longer turned out to be 5 years. So
because you were doing your master already there, and then you continue with the PhD.
Yeah. So a bit longer became a lot longer. And then I think, I mean, I was before the PhD really interested in almost anything. So only thing I knew is that I wanted to travel and I wanted to see different cultures. I wanted to learn as much as possible. That was one thing. And I knew I loved math as well. That was the other point. So between these two, I was really open to doing anything analytical, really. And I was open to going back to France to do even some business or maybe go into management consulting, which had absolutely zero to do with research for the greater good, let's put it that way. And so turned out that I did a PhD, and after that, I applied for EPFL. There were 117 candidates, I remember. And I just got the position probably because I was coming from a place which was well known, I would imagine. That was the major motivation. And my then supervisor at the postdoc level knew very well one of the supervisors I was with, and therefore could definitely know the sort of the quality of the education there.
Yeah, life is always unpredictable, right? But so you said at the very beginning of this career of yours, you didn't really want to do a PhD, and then you end up some years later with a lot of success in your belt. I was looking at your Google Scholar profile today, and I think now you're near 25,000 citations and an H-index of 82, or that's what Google says. So first of all, congratulations on that. But then how the same man that didn't want to have a PhD then I found it in a cafe telling me, I wish more people would have a PhD, right? So during this career, how did your perspective change, and what leads you to now kind of saying maybe more people should do that?
Well, I think the point was that I'm not from an academic family. So I really had zero idea what a PhD was. I had, honestly speaking, no idea what an engineer was before I embarked into engineering studies. I mean, I had really no clue. What I did is simply select the toughest thing I could ever do. So if, for engineering...
That's a great point.
Yeah, for engineering classes, I went to the engineering preparatory schools in France, which people that know that system will know, which is the most competitive one, basically, because I love math and people do math there a lot, like 14 hours per week, at least, maybe 16 to 18. 10 hours of physics, barely anything else. So, you spend your whole life from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day doing what you love. So there was really no reason not to do it. And on top of that, it's the most selective thing. So that's where everybody wants to go. So why not
Yeah.
do that? I mean, for me, it made everything logical. And so I had no question really where I would go. Then, I mean, I selected the toughest possible thing.
Yeah.
Then I ended up in a school I had not predicted. Another thing that I had completely not predicted, civil engineering. But I chose it because it had a connection to Northwestern in Chicago, so I could do my master's and then,
Hmm.
incidentally, the PhD. But basically, I
Yeah,
just selected the thing that was the toughest, and I always worked the hardest as hard as I could. I think, I mean, it just didn't come automatically. That's for sure. But I had no
Yeah,
clue.
I do agree. If you,
No
I
meaning.
realize that if you ask me during my PhD, what was the secret or the important things to learn during a PhD, I would have answered you, it teaches you how to fail because it confronts you with so many difficult tasks and tasks that you were never equipped to solve. That if you are especially a very accomplished student that really knows how to read the book and prepare for an exam, this will be the first place where you fail. But honestly, if you ask me right now that I had a little bit more time in between the PhD and now when reflecting back, it will say it will really teaches you how to do hard things, right? Things for which you don't really have a manual. And I think that's a very valuable lesson in life because it can really it's a truly interdisciplinary skills in our modern world, especially. Yeah.
Yeah,
um,
exactly. I mean, sorry to interrupt you, but this is exactly where I was going next. So it's to me, I didn't really learn. I mean, the technical things I learned are enormous. I mean, I became a completely different person technically, meaning mathematically, physics-based, coding, C++, how to code something based on nothing. I knew absolutely nothing when I started. I had very good foundations in math, but which goes on to say that the foundations, in my opinion, are really the most important thing. So primary, secondary school, first 2 years of university,
mhm.
and then the rest is probably kind of useless because this is the only thing I used. I mean,
Yeah.
and I just use that and hard work and the ability to work for 70 to 100 hours per week. And apart from that, I didn't use much. But then I learned a lot about, every day I wake up, and I face the exact same problem as I have been facing for 6 months. And this enormous beast is still there, and I have no clue what is going on.
How to
And I
slay this
and I need to
dragon. Yeah.
learn it from scratch, basically. So because no one has seen this problem before, that's the difference. As you pointed out, I thought it was so well said that if you're good at doing very scholarly activities like reading books or solving problems that were already solved in the past, maybe you're not the best person to do a PhD, but then maybe you can learn. And for me, that was exactly what I did because I don't think we were educated in a very creative way where I'm from. In France, it's quite, strict by rote. You have to be very rigorous all the time. You're told off if you're not. And it's a bit of a weaker version of the Russian system.
I'm not that used to the system, so I will not comment further. But I think it's a very very intense way of putting it. Yeah,
Yes.
and also I think you're a great example of this kind of curiosity that, if I understood, was always driving you. Because I saw professors like specializing in one specific subject and then stick to them and become very experts, but then stay there all their career. While you really spend a lot of different fields. I mean, you come from what I believe it's incredibly, let's say, a beautiful field that is the one of numerical simulations. I think your PhD thesis was on extended finite elements methods, right? So a particular subset of the finite elements method that tries to generalize them. And so this already kind of allows people to explore a lot of different applications, right? But you, I think, went the other mile. I saw you've done quite a lot of work on machine learning, for example, and in a lot of different fields, spanning from the biomedical fields to the classical engineering fields, and more and more. So, yeah, what would be your favorite as of today? your favorite field you ever entered into thanks to these curriculum of yours?
I think it's easily maybe, it's funny because as you were speaking, I was going through what we've been doing, and it's so difficult to answer because each different topic
Too
has
many
its
interesting
own,
things.
yeah, and each different field has its own beauty, and I mean, the immediate thing that came to my mind is neuroscience, and the reason why that is, I guess, is because it's the newest. And so this is where there is still really a huge amount to learn. And I think there is, for me, a real drive to get into topics that I don't know. And I think there is also danger in this because you get high basically through novelty. It's very easy
Especially if
to
you're a curious person, right?
get very excited about something because it's new.
You mentioned neuroscience, and I have to admit that neuroscience kind of rocks. So I think that's why you switched to a room full of rocks in your background.
That also it goes to show that we are very fast in the university setting, so we collect gems and stones from prehistorical times, but it does not forbid us from moving forward at sometimes glacier pace, but still moving.
Indeed, to a technologist like you, it will give you the passage of time because all our tooling was once made of rocks and now is made still of silicon, but in a different shape. And I wanted to ask you about neuroscience. This is indeed a very interesting topic that is becoming also sometimes a bit esoterical in this quest of merging human brain with machines, and at the same time at this everyday more pressing topic of dealing with consciousness, what consciousness is, and these kind of big questions, right? And I believe you are confronted continuously is that you treat problem of intelligence both from a machine point of view, so since your background in machine learning, and from observing human intelligence. So have you ever had any revelation about it by being an expert in kind of both the field? You're not a neuroscientist, but still you worked with brains, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you say we work with brains because what started, I think I'll start with that because I think in 2006, we started working on a topic which has nothing neuroscience-y about it. It's simply how to cut a brain with a scalpel in real time and how to simulate this cutting so that we can help surgeons do that more effectively, help them train, and also navigate better during surgeries. And this is something that still today is of interest to us. We've been working with the local hospital, the CHL in Luxembourg, and Frank Hertel. And this is really after so many years, 18 years of working with that, we have finally made quite some progress. And there is a chance that we make some real actual
So when you see a brain, you mostly see, since your background, very interesting material that deforms in ways different material are not, rather than an actual computational machine. You're managed to differentiate the two of them. You don't obsess like other people would do onto, okay, this is where consciousness resides somehow. How does it do? You manage to split. I think that's the actual secret for delivering good results, right? And not obsessing too much on all the rabbit hole that we can observe. And actually, tell me a little bit more. Sorry for our audience, but I'm just so interested. How differently does the brain behave structurally to something like iron, let's say?
So again, I'm not the world expert in this. There are people like Sylvia Boudet in Erlangen, Paul Steinman, and the whole team there that are really the people. I mean, of course, not the only ones, but some of the leaders in that field. But I think from my understanding, what happens in the brain is that, first of all, it behaves, the closest engineering material would be something between a sponge and rubber, essentially. So there are many ways that you can model these behaviors. You can think of it as a sort of rubber band that you extend And depending how quickly you pull, you will have different responses. And that is something which characterizes what are called viscoelastic materials. And in order to model this behavior, you can do it either using an assumption that the material is a complete continuum, so a solid only, or you can think of it as a sort of sponge, meaning porous material, where you have some pores and you have a skeleton, which is like the sponge material, but in between the sponge material, you have holes that are filled with either air in certain materials, like the soil underground, or water, or both, and sometimes oil. So that's why these materials are very important for engineering, because you can figure out how to extract things from it, in particular valuable things like oil. And they are also very important because they can model this viscoelastic behavior. And that is also very helpful if you want to deliver drugs inside the brain, for example, because the drug is going to diffuse and also advect as the fluid moves around. So you have different physical phenomena. And I think the biggest difficulty in all these modeling approaches, when I say modeling, I mean two things. Once first of all, you see something and you want to know what equations govern that thing.
Yep.
So, and the second thing is you want to know how to solve these equations. So that's also a way to model it. But for the first part, finding the model, I think the most difficult thing is to think about what's important to the user. And there are some quantities set of interest. And depending on these quantities, you will have to focus more or less on some of the physics behind the phenomena. For example, if you're trying to diffuse some sort of chemical through the brain, through the blood-brain barrier, for example, or inside the brain itself in order to get rid of some tumor, or maybe do something different. In any case, you will need to solve a transport problem, because these particles or these concentrations, these chemicals, they are going to basically be transported, they are going to diffuse, and they are going to be advected and convected and so on. So there will be a lot of physical actions that need to be taken into account. On the other hand, if you're interested in simply pressing slowly on a brain, when you do not really have any dynamics effect, as when you have a brain injury, for example, caused by a shock, hitting a wall at high speed with a bike, for example, or a helmet, or having two rugby men hitting each other at 50 kilometers an hour, well, 25 times 2, running towards each other at speed.
Pleasant experiences, yes.
That's not so cool. And the brain gets shaken, but then you have dynamics that is taken into account. So the problem is then, for each case, the model that you will use will presumably be different, because you want different outcomes. And I think that's...
And mechanically, how different or similar are two brains with each other? So on whatever they compute, we know they're very different. If you take two people, what's inside their brain is likely going to be very different. But mechanically, how similar or different are the brains of two patients? Meaning, do we already have enough equations to say the setup of the problem is kind of trivial because it's more or less going to look the same? Or are material properties of the brain significantly change patient by patient?
So I think there are two things. The material properties change significantly, not only from patient to patient, but within one patient. Same place in the brain, but over time. So if you take any point in the brain and you look at it over time, that property will change because of various things: age, because of chemicals that are being taken by the patient, maybe drugs, for example. And during a surgical intervention, that will change depending on surfactants that are used, depending on the water content of the atmosphere in the OR, depending on many things. So that's one thing. And then between patients, the variability is enormous. You can really get orders of magnitude sometimes in the parameters.
And you still, I guess, need to deliver an incredible accuracy, because if you want to track, for example, I guess a tumor that you want to remove or something similar, here we are talking about sub-millimeter level, of course, right?
Exactly, millimeter level, yeah. That's exactly the level of detail you want to reach, which is not huge, but it's sufficiently difficult that current methods struggle. But I think there is also an indication that if there is such variability in the parameters that we use, it's probably because the parameters are not the right ones.
Indeed.
Yeah. if we had a model that made sense, presumably the variability between the parameters would be less, because there is no reason why there should be huge variations in what apparently looks the same from afar.
Yeah, indeed. It looks like the recipe for a very hard problem, like we said before, because indeed you have something that in which you need to be very, very accurate. You don't want to chop part of the brain cell of a patient that you don't want to remove, but at the same time, it seems almost impossible to be accurate, because if depending by the time of the day or the day in the year and anything that you put, material property can change so much. Indeed, is not something that looks like an easy go. But as we said before, doing difficult things is what a PhD teaches you, right? So maybe that's one of the reasons why you said we need more PhD students, because we have so many hard problems around, right?
Yes, and also because I think it's such a beautiful thing to do. I mean, just to push your boundaries all the time, and to push the barriers that are in the way of your own understanding of yourself, really. I mean, for me, this is really, the revelation is more, I mean, in fact, there were many revelations and there are many others to come. But for me, it was really understanding myself. How do I behave when I'm stuck in front of a problem for too long? Do I give up? When do I give up? How long can I be focused for? Am I going to get distracted?
When do I need to have a walk? When do you need to have a run? Because I have to mention that across all your academics achievements, you also run marathons, and with pretty good times, since I remember when we met. So yes, you have all the toolkits at the arsenal, right? Are you still running marathons?
Well, in fact, what's funny is that I was pretty slow at marathons, in my opinion, but we were running ultra marathons with my friend Jakub Lenkiewicz, and so that was fun. But we were also slow there, but we were running 100, 120 kilometers, so that was a different story. But really, again, some sort of mental break from everything, a way to meditate.
Do you ever try to simulate when will your knees give up with all so much running on your back?
In fact, I did better than simulate. I did physical experiments in that case.
You collected data of your own, right?
And it wasn't the knee, but the calf that decided that it was not agreeing with me after 10 kilometers out of 120. So I had to run 110 kilometers with a calf that was hurting. So it's a bit of a problem, but you forget quickly, and the body is well made, so it makes you.
So you actually done it. You didn't stop.
No, I didn't stop.
Wow. Yeah.
Because that's, I mean, I usually when I start, unless I'm really incapacitated, I will.
You want to finish something. That is another really good skill to finish a PhD. I've seen a lot of people that are almost so close to get everything, but then they get, let's say, they lose the will because it's so difficult. And often, once you've done it, you know that they lost their will just 30 meters before the actual target. It's just they cannot see the target, right? Yes. That's indeed.
You need really to believe in yourself, which I didn't, honestly, really. I mean, I learned to, I think still now, there are still in some ways, some insecurities, because we are constantly given to see our limits, and they are so clear that, I mean, at least as far as I'm concerned, I think it took really a long time for me to realize my own worth, what I was good at, what I was not good at. Also, it was very important to me to realize that there were multiple profiles, intellectual profiles that were needed in academia, not only one person that can code very fast and understand problems super fast and do the math quickly, but also people who can see the next directions in which to go in order to advance the field faster. And being able to manage a group and motivate people to get their best and to outperform their own limits. I mean, I think this is something that's also valuable. Sure. So there are many facets, but for me, it's very difficult to be in academia for that reason, that you always are facing your own limits all the time. So it's easy to think
your peers are not, let's say, the least gifted people around you. You're probably are
Exactly.
facing exactly the opposite. You always are seeing yourself with the smartest people in the world, right? Yeah,
Yes.
that's
Yes. Yes.
tough. But also, as you kind of said, a PhD doesn't mean that you have to stay in academia for the rest of your
No.
life. I, for once, left academia just at the end of the PhD, even though we still managed to collaborate on things that are really interesting projects. It's really for me a really useful experience to try to get a measure with yourself. Compete in a field in which there are no manuals, compete in a field where nobody can really tell you how to do something, and somehow find your way. It's probably not really as painful as running an ultra marathon with a broken with a broken piece like you've done, but still it has some of this, right? It has some of no, I want to get it done. That I think is something very useful for the further career. And so that's the most interesting, at least for me, thing you worked till now. Let's say neuroscience. I just picked it up, but one of the many things that you worked till now. If you would have to start your PhD today, which field would you pick?
I would pick neuroscience for sure.
Hmm.
No hesitation. And yeah, I mean, there is really no doubt about that. I'm totally fascinated by this, and I think there is so much to know, so much to understand from the molecular level to the continuum level at the organ scale, understanding how energy is made. I've started working with people at LCSB on that topic now a few years back. We have already one PhD who finished, Sofia Farina. Now we have several others who are starting, as well as postdocs. We work with Alex Kupin and Anna Grunewald, and this is just fabulous. I mean, if I could, in fact, yeah, I'm reading as much as I can, listening to podcasts of experts in that area, trying to see what are the directions that are interesting, and trying to see how we can put our little, break to help build this wall, because I find it totally fascinating. And what I like is also it's quite mathematical. And at the moment, it's a super exciting moment because math is really infiltrating the field
Mm-hmm.
quite closely.
That
So
was more experimental before or
yeah,
similar. Yeah.
biology is becoming some sort of applied physics field,
Mm-hmm.
and it's super exciting because you can write down equations on how a mitochondrium works. We're going to have a project on
Yeah,
that,
fascinating.
and I mean this is great because this is what you learned in high school. The Krebs cycle and how to make energy in a cell and so on, and then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you see this little thing with the ion channels and so on, the potential differences, how they influence each other, how that then the position of that mitochondrium inside the cell is going to influence the way that it metabolizes glucose, for example, or other substrates, and how it's going to fulfill or not its function in supporting neurons, for example, in the case of glial cells like astrocytes and so on. It's super, super interesting. It's so complex. There are huge projects like the Blue Brain project, on which Sophia works now in EPFL, and all these things are just awesome. And I think this is great, really.
That sounds so cool. That sounds so cool. And on that note, so anybody that would be interested can probably reach you and have very interesting conversation on all the possible applications. Maybe one thing I want to wrap up this first session with is expanding on this. A PhD doesn't necessarily mean staying all your life in academia, and I think you are also a great example of this one because you not only are a very accomplished professor, but you also recently opened multiple, at least 2 companies, I think, to try to advance close to academia. Do you wanna tell me something about those companies?
Yeah, so the first one was called Ariana Technology, or Technologies. It was open with Christian Vincenot, Anya, his wife, and his brother Patrick Vincenot. And we were trying to do what's called contact tracing during COVID. So we were using Bluetooth, low energy devices, trying to figure out proximity between people, as Google and Apple did later. But we were
They stole the idea from you. I got it.
yeah,
But
they
we will
yeah they
we will
did
not
it.
that too publicly. But
Yeah, they are a little bit bigger and a little bit more influential. So it was the wrong, I think, political time to introduce such an idea from Luxembourg, and we were in Luxembourg. Although the algorithm that had been written by Christian was really efficient, and the method worked much earlier than all the other international initiatives were able to make it work, simply because we were small and
nimble, yeah,
there
important.
was one code developer that was Christian. That's it, and so it was really clear that we could have made it work, but it didn't work. And then in the end, we closed the company this year because it didn't make any sense anymore, being focused in an area which did not have traction. And the second one is called GRU IA, and this is a company focusing on training for artificial intelligence. We created this with Professor Yvan Ourdin and Christophe Ley in the University of Luxembourg, both statisticians and probabilists. And the goal there is more really training and consulting in the field of data science. So we try to help companies figure out what they should know in order to be competitive in this world of big data. As everybody uses the term, why not use it? And then that's it. So we are basically doing training bespoke on the job for people that are already professionals, but that would like to upskill in the field of data science, both at the theoretical level, at the managerial level also. So how do you manage data? How do you deal with what the data flow is? Is it high quality data, low quality data? How do you label it? How do you store it? What do you do with the test statistics? But then also we can do hands-on exercises and problem solving where people can come with their data and we try to help them analyze this. And that is basically the second company we're building.
Yeah, indeed. And this is another example of how I think a PhD could be a great stepping stone for curious people to really develop in multiple fields. I think we started talking about this together, and I think you are one of the many, but at the same time not extremely abundant examples of how incredible a career can be after the PhD, and it could be a good idea to explore it a little bit further, maybe on follow-up episodes, maybe try to understand what are the key points to have a successful PhD, and maybe expand more on what are other possible paths. You had a very, very interesting one, but probably you know a lot of extremely interesting people that had other path after their PhD. And so if we manage to convince some people to give a try to this very demanding but also very fulfilling step on their career, well, I will be very happy. And if in the meanwhile we also manage to talk about very interesting subjects like the one you are treating, that's even better. So for today, I would say anyway, this sounds like a quite interesting conversation, like the very interesting life you live till now. Anything else you would like to add?
Thanks a lot. I completely agree with you. And I think one topic which would be highly interesting and useful to people that are thinking about this, and which I hear a lot, is the concept of work-life balance or lack thereof, and how to manage your life around an academic career. And
very important.
Presumably how that relates to the imposter syndrome, which we touched upon today, and which I was surprised that people in my career course, because I give a course to students on how to help them manage their PhD and their postdocs and career afterwards. I was surprised to see that none of the 12 students had heard about the imposter syndrome idea, which
they experienced it probably, but they didn't heard about the formalization of it.
I asked them 5 questions to them, and they answered in such a way which proved that they were suffering directly from the syndrome. Indeed. But they did not want to admit to that. They were simply, I mean, they didn't know the name, but they were there were clearly people that were, and it's very
Great
local.
topics. I really love them. So how to find a work-life balance in an enterprise that is at the same time putting everything that you have inside. That's a really cool topic. And also imposter syndrome. Let's talk about it in a follow-up session. For today, thank you so much. I learned quite a lot, and it's always nice to reiterate all the successes that you are piling up. It's difficult to keep them out, so to keep on with that. So we probably kept some of them out. But yeah, it was really fun to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriele. It was a pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you for having me.
Here was the second episode of this channel. I hope the audio and video quality improved a little. Let me know what you think about this type of content. For those of you who liked the first video more, there is a second episode with Enrico talking about pins coming next. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.